Hi, I'm Sheri Lunn for This Way Out. Today I'll be reading The Price of Salt by Patricia Highsmith. You might recognize the book as the basis for the movie Carol, starring Cate Blanchett, Rooney Mara, and Sarah Paulson. I'll read the back, the publisher's notes on the back of the book before we start reading inside. A chance encounter between two lonely women leads to a passionate romance in this lesbian cult classic. Therese, a struggling young sales clerk, and Carol, a homemaker in the midst of bitter divorce, abandon their oppressive daily routines for the freedom of the open road, where love can blossom. But their newly discovered bliss is shattered when Carol is forced to choose between her child and her lover. Author Patricia Highsmith is best known for her psychological thrillers Strangers on a Train and The Talented Mr. Ripley. The book was originally published in 1952 under a pseudonym. The Price of Salt was heralded at the time as the novel of a love society forbids. Highsmith's sensitive treatment of fully realized characters who defy stereotypes about homosexuality marked a departure from previous lesbian pulp fiction. Erotic, eloquent, and suspenseful, this story offers an honest look at the necessity of being true to one's nature. Let's start somewhere close to the beginning. Their eyes met at the same instant. Therese glancing up from a box she was opening, and the woman just turning her head so she looked directly at Therese. She was tall and fair, her long figure graceful in the loose fur coat that she held open with a hand on her waist. Her eyes were gray, colorless, yet dominant as light or fire, and caught by them, Therese could not look away. She heard the customer in front of her repeat a question, and Therese stood there mute. The woman was looking at Therese too, with a preoccupied expression, as if half her mind were on whatever it was she meant to buy here, and though there were a number of salesgirls between them, Therese felt sure that the woman would come to her. Then Therese saw her walk slowly toward the counter, heard her heart stumble to catch up with the moment it had let pass, and felt her face grow hot as the woman came nearer and nearer. "May I see one of those valises?" the woman asked, and leaned on the counter looking down through the glass top. The damaged valise lay only a yard away. Therese turned around and got a box from the bottom of a stack, a box that had never been opened. When she stood up, the woman was looking at her with the calm gray eyes that Therese could neither quite face nor look away from. "That's the one I like, but I don't suppose I can have it, can I?" she said, nodding toward the brown valise in the show window behind Therese. Her eyebrows were blonde, curving around the bend of her forehead. Her mouth was as wise as her eyes, Therese thought, and her voice was like her coat, rich and supple, and somehow full of secrets. "Yes," Therese said. Therese went back to the stockroom for the key. The key hung just inside the door on a nail, and no one was allowed to touch it but Mrs. Hendrickson. Miss Davis saw her and gasped, but Patrice said, "I need it," and went out. She opened the show window and took the suitcase down and laid it on the counter. "You're giving me the one on display?" She smiled as if she understood. She said casually, leaning both forearms on the counter, studying the contents of the valise. "They'll have a fit, won't they?" "It doesn't matter," Therese said. "All right, I'd like this. That's COD. And what about clothes? Do these come with it?" There were cellophane-wrapped clothes in the lid of the suitcase with a price tag on them. Therese said, "No, they're separate. If you want doll clothes, these aren't as good as the clothes in the dolls' clothing department across the aisle." "Oh, will it get to New Jersey before Christmas?" "Yes, it'll arrive Monday." If it didn't, Therese thought, well, she would deliver it herself. "Mrs. H.F. Aird," the woman's soft, distinct voice said, and Therese began to print it on the COD slip. The name, the address, the town appeared beneath the pencil point like a secret Therese would never forget, like something stamping itself in her memory forever. "You won't make any mistakes, will you?" the woman's voice asked. Therese noticed the woman's perfume for the first time and, instead of replying, could only shake her head. She looked down at the slip to which she was laboriously adding the necessary figures and wished with all her power to wish anything that the woman would simply continue her last words and say, "Are you really glad to have met me? Then why can't we see each other again? Why can't we even have lunch together today?" Her voice was so casual, and she might have said it so easily, but nothing came after the "will you?" Nothing to relieve the shame of having been recognized as a new salesgirl, hired for the Christmas rush, inexperienced and liable to make mistakes. Therese slid the book toward her for her signature. Then the woman picked up her gloves from the counter and turned and slowly went away, and Therese watched the distance widen and widen. Her ankles below the fur of the coat were pale and thin. She wore plain black suede shoes with high heels. "That's a COD order?" Therese looked into Mrs. Henderson's ugly, meaningless face. "Yes, Mrs. Hendrickson." "Don't you know you're supposed to give the customer the strip at the top? How do you expect them to claim the purchase when it comes? Where's the customer? Can you catch her?" Yes. She was only 10 feet away, across the aisle at the doll's clothing counter. And with the green slip in her hand, she hesitated a moment, then carried it around the counter, forcing herself to advance, because she was suddenly abashed by her appearance, the old blue skirt, the cotton blouse. Whoever assigned the green smocks had missed hers, and her humiliating flat shoes. "I'm supposed to give you this," she said, laying the miserable little scrap beside the hand on the edge of the counter and turning away. Behind the counter again, Therese faced the stock boxes, sliding them thoughtfully out and back as if she were looking for something. Therese waited until the woman must have finished at the counter and gone away. She was conscious of the moments passing like irrevocable time, irrevocable happiness, for in these last seconds she might turn and see the face she would never see again. She was conscious, too, dimly now, and with a different horror, of the old, unceasing voices of customers at the counter calling for assistance, calling to her, and of the low humming of the little train, part of the storm that was closing in and separating her from the woman. But when she turned, finally, she looked directly into the gray eyes again. The woman was walking toward her, and as if time had turned back, she leaned on the counter again and gestured to a doll and asked to see it. Therese got the doll and dropped it with a clatter on the counter, and the woman glanced at her. "Sounds unbreakable," the woman said. Therese smiled. "Yes, I'll get this too," she said in a quiet, slow voice that made a pool of silence in the tumult around them. She gave her name and address again, and Therese took it slowly from her lips, as if she did not already know it by heart. "That really will arrive before Christmas?" "It'll come Monday at the latest. That's 2 days before Christmas." "Good. I don't mean to make you nervous." Therese tightened the knot in the string she had put around the doll box, and the knot mysteriously came open. "No," she said, in an embarrassment so profound there was nothing left to defend. She got the knot tied, and under the woman's eyes. "It's a rotten job, isn't it?" "Yes." Therese folded the COD slips around the white string and fastened them with a pin. "So forgive me for complaining." Therese glanced at her, and the sensation returned that she knew her from somewhere, that the woman was about to reveal herself, and they would both laugh then and understand. "You're not complaining. I'll know to get there." Therese looked across the counter where the woman had stood before and saw the tiny slip of green paper still on the counter. "You really are supposed to keep the COD slip." Her eyes changed with her smile now, brightened with a gray, colorless fire that Therese almost knew, almost could place. I've gotten things before without them. I always lose them. She bent to sign the second COD slip. Therese watched her go away with a step as slow as when she had come, saw her look at another counter as she passed it and slap her black gloves across her palm twice, 3 times. Then she disappeared into an elevator. And Therese turned to the next customer. In the middle of the afternoon, she went down to the first floor and bought a card in the greeting card department. It wasn't a very interesting card, but at least it was simple and plain blue and gold. She stood with the pen poised over the card, thinking of what she might have written. "You are magnificent," or even, "I love you." Finally, writing quickly the excruciatingly dull and impersonal "Special salutations from Frankenberg's." She added her number 645-A in lieu of a signature. Then she went down to the post office in the basement, hesitated at the letter drop, losing her nerve suddenly at the sight of her hand holding the letter halfway in the slot. What would happen? She was going to leave the store in a few days anyway. What would Mrs. H.F. Aird care? The blonde eyebrows would perhaps lift a little. She would look at the card a moment and then forget it. Therese dropped the card in the slot. The Price of Salt by Patricia Highsmith. I have worked with This Way Out for many, many years, both as a reporter and a producer, and I served on the board of directors for quite a while. And the stories that we would hear from people around the world whose only connection to the LGBT community, in some places far away and some places closer than you might imagine, would be from the voices coming through their radio, telling our stories, the stories of history and current events and entertainment. And This Way Out was oftentimes a lifeline for a lot of these folks who felt like they were really alone in the world. And so that's why something like this, what we're all doing today for This Way Out, is incredibly important. Whether we ever hear from listeners or not, we know that we are changing and perhaps even saving lives out there. So if you can give a donation to keep the all-volunteer team at This Way Out continuing to produce quality LGBTQ plus radio, please do so. Every little bit counts, from $1 to $100 or more if you can. I know that times are incredibly difficult right now for all of us. So I hope that you are staying safe, that you're wearing your masks, and that you are healthy. Thank you so much. I'm Sheri Lunn for This Way Out.